Okay, boys and girls, Ms. Mac here. So I want to do a quick little video going over price elasticity of demand, or wherever this also connects to some other types of demand elasticity that we'll look at, and that's what influences. So what makes something elastic and inelastic? And I've got some pictures here for you, which you can see. But what I want you to think about is elasticity is about how sensitive customers are to a change in price, right? So I'm just pointing out here that customers, we pretty much always talk about like individual household people like Jack and his demand for this or that, but customers in a market could actually be other businesses as well. It could even be the government. So maybe just widen your perspective or your thoughts about who the end customer might be, like who's demanding this product. And so really all we're talking about here when we talk about factors is what makes you sensitive, like to change the price. Why do you care? Like when, say, for example, petrol goes up in price, why is that most people, well, they probably care, but why do they not really do anything about it? It's not like suddenly everyone starts buying petrol. So really this is what it means by factors. What would make your customers, and usually we just look at these lot here, but could be businesses and government as well, what makes them particularly sensitive, i.e. they're kind of like, oh, I don't want it, or no, I don't like that, but there's not much I can do about it. So what influences that? So I've got several little pictures here, okay, I was trying to be crafty with here. I might just insert a text box. Shall we do that? Can't see a text box. Well, that's really unhelpful. Yeah, never mind. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is time. So a really big influence, and some of these kind of connect together, these pictures, is how quickly you are able to adjust your consumption patterns. You see the price change and you're like, right, I'm not buying that. Can you do that? Like, is it something that you need right now? Like, can you stop buying it immediately, or do you need to take some time to change your habits, change your patterns, you know, in terms of what you do each day to avoid buying that product? And petrol is a really good example. The price of petrol can go up and people may not like it, but they can't exactly stop buying it straight away. They might be like, right, I'm going to use the car less now, but then they have to try and think about how they can adjust their patterns, i.e. like walk to work, bike, they may have to get a bike, they may need to figure out how they can walk to bike, they might try and carpool, so they have to take time to be able to adjust so that they can perhaps drive less and therefore consume less of the product and therefore avoid the price change. So that's what it means by time. How quickly are you able to like move away from consuming that product? Or we're going to talk about like substitutes and complements. So you can see the wee Pepsi thing here. So it might be that something else is really cheap now, but like, is that available for you to buy straight away? Like maybe the place you normally shop doesn't stock that, okay, and you need to adjust where you shop to be able to buy that product. Or maybe it's just you don't really like this Pepsi, okay, and even though it's a lot cheaper, you don't want to buy it for that reason. However, with time, maybe you'd adjust your tastes and preferences, and you might be like, oh, yeah, well, I actually like it now. So you'll start consuming the other product. So time is a pretty big factor. I don't know, can I write here? I can just write time. Time, big letters. Okay, let's make it big. Okay, so your ability to switch away your consumption of a product is pretty important. All right, and this classic one here, I think this should be really, really obvious, is the old Pepsi versus Coca-Cola. And what I'm getting here is substitutes. Okay, so your ability to substitute away from this product. All right, so it's gone up in price. Is there something else that basically does the same thing that you can switch away from? So we're gonna, in your textbook, it talks about bread being like a necessity, and we'll talk about that shortly. But in terms of bread, if like say Tip Top was to go up in price, well then maybe you might switch to Freya's. I know Freya's is probably a bit more expensive, but like Plowman's and Freya's, usually about the same price. I'm talking about loaves of bread here, people. You may not be overly familiar, but these like different brands of product, and the more different brands there are of a product, then the more ability you have to switch away your consumption. Okay, I'm just checking the time. Yeah, we're going fine, 4 minutes. So another really good example is I had some students who, you might remember Kevin Lee, and they were doing their Kawa drink as their business idea. So it's something that business need to think about. When they first started selling it, I was like, boys, like you've got probably quite an elastic demand curve, and that's because like how many like bottled drinks are there? Like you go to the supermarket and you can have like whole aisles devoted to like different bottled drinks. You go to the supermarket and you have several fridges devoted to bottled drinks. So the more substitutes there are, the more elastic is the demand. all right, and you end up with quite a flat demand curve. Idea, if you were to increase your price, then your customers can just go, yeah, I don't want that kombucha, I'll go get the other one. Or I don't like that lemonade, I'll just get the other brand. So it's the idea of substitution. How easily are you able to substitute your product? So therefore, those products that have like no substitutes, they have a very inelastic demand curve. Okay, now moving on, I think this one, I don't know if you're probably thinking, I don't know what you're thinking, I'm thinking durability. Right, so durability. I've just bought some new whiteware. Unfortunately, I'm still waiting for it to be delivered. Fingers crossed, maybe next week if we get out of lockdown. So for me, a washing machine should last like a really, really long time. All right, like I'm talking like 10 years or something like that, or even more potentially if you look after it well. I know it's hard to get them fixed when they break down, but let's say this washing machine I've bought, it's going to last a really long time. So I'm not going to be buying it again anytime soon. So therefore, my demand for it should be relatively elastic because it's going to be a huge amount. Like the washing machine we bought, I can't remember, I think it was like $1,000 or something. I know, probably more, can't remember, but it's quite expensive. So, I don't want to pay that too often. So I've been keeping an eye on washing machines for quite a long time to see what their prices are. And when they drop in price, I'm like, I'm going to go get it. So, it does matter to me what the price of that product is. Like I'm particularly sensitive to it. If I'm going to upgrade, say, our kitchen table, our dining table, then I'm going to be keeping an eye out for like dining tables. And I'm particularly sensitive to price changes. If it drops in price, then I'm going to go, I might consider that now. So durability definitely affects your consumption of these products and how elastic your demand might be. And it's kind of like the idea is that you can just, like if this washing machine was like really expensive, then I'm like, what, it's fine, let's just not buy it, let's just keep the old one for now, if I could keep the old one and just use that until it breaks down completely, because I don't need to buy the brand new one straight away. I'd rather wait till the price drops. So durability is something that's not often discussed, but it actually is a really important factor in terms of elasticity. Right, how are we going for time? All right, 7 minutes, we're halfway there. So, you guys probably don't want to see the old tampons there, but I'll get to that in a second. All right, so mints. So another thing is like how expensive the product is relative to your overall expenditure. So like price relative to overall spending, shorter. And that's the idea that something like mints, like I haven't bought any for quite a while, so you'll have to help me out here, but it doesn't really cost that much. Like it's at the aisle where the checkout is. So if you go to buy this, all the little mints and the chocolate bars are right where the checkout is. And that's because these things tend to be quite cheap, like, like $1, maybe less than $1. And if people are spending like $150 on groceries, then if this is like $1 and it goes up to like, they have to know, it's $1.20 this week, then they're not really going to blink too much with that. It's kind of like, I've just spent $150. So the fact this is now $1.20 as opposed to $1, yeah, I could stomach that, that's fine. And it's sort of the same with like chocolate bars and stuff like that too. Like when they're kind of like, like $1, $1.50, you kind of, again, I'm spending $200 on groceries. That's really nothing compared to what else I've paid. So your demand for these things tends to be what we call quite inelastic, right? Just because they're quite cheap. The book talks about matches, but I thought that was a bit boring. Another one that, I'm going to go there, sorry to those who are uncomfortable with me bringing up sanitary products, but the paper here in the sanitary products, the tampons, is about how many times you use it or like the number of users. So that's probably not quite what I was meaning with tampons, but in terms of tampons, like I don't know that you really, sometimes you do see some discounting on these, but the idea is that when you buy them, you like a set amount for a set period of time. So like a lady would only use a set amount. So if the price was to drop, they're not necessarily going to rush out and buy lots. They might, but only a limited amount because you only need a certain amount of tampons. Okay, I'm probably making people a bit uncomfortable here. But the point is, it's the idea that you can, there's no point storing a huge amount of tampons and stuff like that, maybe for the younger ladies perhaps, but if you're only going to use a certain amount, you don't need, like there's no point having massive amount because you're just not going to use it. So sometimes when they discount these things, you don't necessarily see a huge change in quantity demand, like a huge rush to go buy them, right? There might be maybe for ladies in the younger years, but again, there's only so many tampons you need. Paper, however, is actually used by a lot of people. Like, so when I talked about different customers, the government, like different businesses, consumers. So it could be the type of product where it's used by lots of people for like different uses, like for work, like office stationery, drawing on, you know, making craft products, that type of thing. So if the price was to drop, then you could see quite a large amount of demand because you've got all these different groups that want to buy it, potentially rushing in and increasing their quantity demand quite a lot relative to the price change. So therefore, something like paper could be more elastic in terms of its demand. And then you can see in the book, at least a really boring example of rubber, and I just don't want to use it, but I think paper is maybe a more modern day example. Now, I don't know where it is, but hopefully it's gone. I'm really gutted, I don't know where it's gone, but I had a little vaccine, okay? So we'll get to those kink demand curves here in a second. But another really big factor, and it's like probably one of the biggest, is it a necessity? Okay, so I did choose a vaccine here. Let's choose it now. Where's the vaccine, people? Here it is. I don't know where it went. That's really mean. Disappeared from my little sheets, probably underneath something. So if something's a vaccine, then we would say it's a necessity, right? So if something's a necessity, you have to buy it. Power, electricity, the petrol's a good one, medications. These things tend to be elastic, and inelastics are in demand because even though, I'll just put here number of uses. I'll format it later. Okay, you've got the idea though. The number of uses, even though like the price could go up considerably, especially now if you think about coronavirus, people will pay whatever. Like there's something you have to have. So when something is something that you have to have, then it becomes a necessity and you're not able to switch away your consumption of it. I just want to change the formatting here. Okay, so when something's a necessity, they do tend to have more inelastic demand, just because of that idea that you don't have there often is no substitutes, but also it's something that you have to have. It's like vital to your living, your life. All right, and the last one in the book, I know that people do find this a little bit weird, and there's a little diagram underneath that you might find a bit weird, is what's called the demand curve and where the price is on the demand curve. So we use the midpoint formula for NCA, and that's because the midpoint formula would show you the elasticity between A and B, so the slope of the curve between these 2 points, if you like. And although this demand curve is actually, it's the same, sometimes the slope of the demand curve is not the same. So that's why I've given you the second one below it. This is showing a demand curve that has different elasticities over the whole curve. All right, and what you can see here is below this price here, the demand curve is actually a lot steeper, so it's relatively inelastic, suggesting that maybe a decrease in price here will result in a relatively small change in quantity demanded. Whereas above this price here, the price was to increase, it's more elastic, it's more flatter, so you would see a relatively larger, say, decrease in quantity demanded. Right, and that's a really special situation, kink demand curve, to a oligopoly, all right, which is something we'll look at later in the year. But it's just the idea that sometimes when you've got lower prices, people don't really, they're like, oh yeah, okay, think about like the chocolate bars, like I said, they're like, oh, it's gone from $1 to $1.50. I don't really mind that. But if you're suddenly getting from, say, I don't know, like $2 to $2.50, here it might be inelastic, here it might be more elastic. And so how elastic it becomes might become more and more elastic as you get into higher price. Think about it, like something gets really, really expensive, then you suddenly may care a lot more if the price was to go up. All right, whereas if the price is really cheap to start with, then you might be like, yeah, I don't really mind. So it's more inelastic. All right, how are we going for time? Oh, we've got a few more minutes. And so the last thing I wanted to just point out is that we're kind of talking as if consumers are all the same people and they all act the same way. When we talk about demand, we talk about like a group of consumers and we're assuming that their demands are the same. But if you break out the demand into, say, young householders like teenagers, young people, sort of teenagers to 25, that sort of thing, and then like middle-aged people like me, and then elder people and stuff like that, their demand, the elasticity of demand, especially price elasticity demand, can be quite different. And so for cigarettes and booze, I just wanted to bring this up because, for example, when the government taxes alcohol and cigarettes, what we can see is quite different behaviours. So, for example, older people for smoking, they can be very inelastic because think about it, they've been smoking for a number of years, and so they can't change away their consumption that well at all, and they may not change at all. Whereas younger people, they might have only just started, so they might be like, I don't want to pay that, and so they will switch away their consumption and stop smoking, which is kind of what we're looking for. And booze is kind of the same, and I've got spirits here, but for example, younger people don't have well-defined taste buds, I would say, and so they may just pay more for their booze because they, they want that particular booze. If it's RTDs, then they can't switch away to the cheaper stuff, whereas the older people are like, no, I'm not going to pay for that expensive stuff. I'll go to the cheaper stuff. And my time's